Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the Agricultural Resilience Incentive Grant Program workshop this morning. My name is Aparna Gazula. I'm the Small Farms and Specialty Crops Advisor in Santa Clara County, but I'm also in San Benito and Santa Cruz counties as well. So to give a brief overview about the Agricultural Resilience Incentive Grant Program, this is a incentive program that is open or provides grants to farmers and ranchers that are operating within Santa Clara County, and it helps to assist them with adopting improved agricultural resource management practices. And these practices have been identified to help improve soil health over time and have been known to help with or provide water and nutrient management benefits. It's a very simple application process. It's a two-page application, and we'll take a look at the various information that's going to be requested in the application in the later slides. So those of you that are submitting applications to this incentive grant program, you can receive funding up to $30,000 for various practices such as compost and mulch application. And there's 25 other different practices that you can select from. Overall, the goal of these practices is to help improve soil health. The University of California Cooperative Extension Office that's located in Santa Clara County. Our offices are based in the Ag Commissioner's building, and we provide free technical assistance if you're interested in submitting an application and would like to avail of this option. So who is eligible for this incentive program? All managers and owners of agricultural operations located within Santa Clara County are eligible to apply. There is no minimum acreage requirement or a maximum acreage limit. Renters, or if you lease land, then you need to have written approval of the property owner. Again, can you apply if you lease land? Yes, even if the land is publicly or privately owned and you lease the land, you can still apply for the Agricultural Resilience Incentive Grant funding. You will need to provide written approval from the property owner. That is, the landowner agreement letter is going to be required along with your application submission. Am I eligible for ARI program if I am a nonprofit organization? Yes, as long as you are a rancher or a grower within Santa Clara County and you are leasing the land or you own the land, then you're eligible even if you're a nonprofit organization. If you're leasing the land, you have to have written approval from the property owner. Am I eligible to submit an application if I share an APN? We have several small-scale growers in the county that share APN, and yes, you are able to apply for the ARI program. But when filling out the application, make sure that you complete the property owner information on additional sheets provided with the application and attach them to your application. And also, you'll need to include a map highlighting which portions of the APN the practices are going to be implemented on prior to the grant being executed. We do provide technical assistance with this. So if you are sharing an APN with your neighbor and you need assistance in putting those maps together, feel free to reach out to us and we'll help you in this process. So if you have a current CDFA Healthy Soils Program grant that is currently being implemented, then you're not eligible to submit an application this year. So for growers or ranchers who are currently enrolled in the Healthy Soils Program, you're not eligible to apply concurrently. But if you finished your funding period, so let's say you received funding in 2021 and you completed your Healthy Soils Program this past year, then you can submit an application this year. So what information would you need to put together when submitting your application? Key things that you need to submit the application include showing where your agricultural land is located within Santa Clara County, the different practices that you wish to apply for, a history of the crops that were grown on the property, history of any conservation practices that were implemented on the property, APN information for the property that you're going to apply the practices on. And if you lease the land, you need to have written approval of the property owner. So continuing the same topic, what you need for filling out the application, you can choose anywhere between 1 to 27 of the various approved management practices. So for example, you could select compost application or mulch application, and you'll need to fill out the section related to the project scope of work, the total cost estimate for implementing the practices that you've selected, and the amount that you're bidding for implementing those practices on the property that you are interested in applying for. There are different practices that you can select from. So for annual cropland, there's a total of 23 different practices. So depending upon the type of practice, some of these do lend themselves for concurrent selection. So for example, you can choose cover crop along with compost application. But there are certain practices that wouldn't go together, and we'll go into a little bit more detail later on in the presentation. The timeline for the various practices is going to vary, and this information is based upon standards that have been established at the national level through the USDA conservation programs, similarly that are eligible for that growers are eligible to apply throughout the country. So for example, alley cropping, the timeline is 18 months. Conservation cover is for 18 months. Compost application, on the other hand, depending upon how many years you would like to implement this practice, you could submit your application for 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. Conservation crop rotation, same thing. You could submit that application for implementing this practice either for a year, 2 years, or 3 years. So wherever you see that range, that's the 1, 2, or 3 year option that you can select when submitting your application. But for the other practices, such as hedgerow or grass waterway, for example, where it is a very specific period of time, it's going to be required that you enter the same amount of time for implementing that practice. Similarly, grazing land also has say various practices that you can select from. So there's 8 different practices. And if you're interested in putting compost on your grazing land, you have the option of selecting 1 to 3 years. For tree shrub establishment, for instance, you are required to do the entire 18 months. For perennial crops, these include your orchards and vineyards. There's 11 different practices that you can select from. And similar to what we discussed earlier, certain practices you can do 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years, whereas other practices such as whole orchard recycling, for instance, you'll have to implement that for the entire 18-month duration. Can I apply to implement multiple practices? Of the various practices that are pre-approved, there are several practices that can be implemented concurrently, and the Comet Planner will help you in that selection process. In fact, multiple practices per application are encouraged because you get more carbon sequestered for the amount that you're requesting. Each practice requires its own total cost estimate in the application or the project scope of work information section. So in the project scope of work, this is what it looks like. You'll be entering the management practice that you're interested in implementing on your land, the total acreage where this practice is going to be implemented, the duration. So for a compost application, like I mentioned earlier, you could select 1, 2, or 3 years. And the total cost estimate, which is based on the Comet Planner information, this section right here, and the amount that you are bidding to be competitive in the selection process. Keep in mind that only one application per parcel or multiple parcels per year are allowed in each year's application process. So for the total cost estimate, applicants must provide an estimate of the total cost of their chosen practices. This is a reverse auction process and when grants are being selected for funding. So name your best price so there is higher chances of getting selected for funding. Like I mentioned, this is a reverse auction process. So to be able to get selected for funding, the lower the bid amount for the total cost estimate, the more likely that you're going to get selected. If the cost estimates are the same as the total cost estimates that are provided by the CDFA Comet Planner, the less the chances of being successful in getting selected. So try to be competitive in your application submission process. We recommend that you use CDFA's Comet Planner to identify what the estimate for implementing a certain practice is, and then use that as a guide when putting together what you think would be the cost that you want to be competitive with. So the link to the CDFA Comet Planner is listed here. I'm going to stop share my screen and we'll go to the website and do a practice run of how to complete the Comet Planner process. What you do is you can start off with the project name. So I'm going to put in ARI grant and I'll put my name in and then select that you're in Santa Clara County. The next step is to select the agricultural system that the land is currently in use. So if you're an annual cropland, then you would select that. If it's an orchard or a vineyard, you would select the second button. Or if it's grazing land, then you select the grazing land section. So let's go ahead and choose the orchard or vineyard, for instance, for this particular example. Based upon the agricultural system that you've selected, the next step is it'll automatically adjust the various the conservation programs that you're eligible for. So let's go ahead and do this. And I'm going to select compost application. And then it gives you the various options for the type of compost. So you have compost with a C/N ratio less than or equal to 11, that is from a certified composting facility. Compost C/N ratio less than or equal to 11, that is produced on farm. C/N ratio greater than 11, purchased from a certified composting facility. C/N ratio greater than 11, that's produced on farm. So I'm going to go ahead and select this one right here, for example. So then it lists the option for the payment scenario. So are you interested in applying 6 tons per acre, 7 tons per acre, or 8 tons per acre? So I am going to choose the 7 tons per acre, and then the next step is to put in the amount of acres that this particular practice is going to be implemented on. So I'll put in 10 acres, for instance, and it automatically generates the amount of carbon dioxide that is sequestered and the estimated payment for implementing this practice of compost application on 10 years. Sorry, on 10 acres. And this is for the entire duration of the 3-year period because that is the minimum requirement from CDFA. So let's say that you are implementing it only for 1 year, then you would divide this by 3. So next up, let's say you're interested in adding another practice. So you would go back up here, select conservation cover, hedgerow planting, and then make your selection. And now let's say I want to do 1,000 linear feet of hedgerows, and it gives you your total cost estimate. So practices that have a very defined period of time. So for example, hedgerows is 18 months. then you would need the entire amount as the bid amount. So practices that are 1 to 3 years, for instance, you divide this based upon the total number of years, because the estimate is based on the highest amount of years, which is 3 years. What is the grant selection process? Grants will be selected on a most competitive on a cost basis for sequestering atmospheric carbon by improving soil health or increasing woody biomass. So based upon what practice you're selecting, what the total cost estimate is in according to the CDFA Comet Planner, and then what you're proposing as your cost. The more competitive you are, the higher the chances of getting selected. So once applications are submitted to the County of Santa Clara towards the end of the month when the deadline has passed, so May 31st is the deadline. After May 31st, the applications are going to be sorted by operation size into two categories. Up to 40 acres are one category, and then the second category is all applications that have acreages that are higher than 40 acres. This might not be applicable if majority of the applications, so 75% or more of the application fall into one category. So these two categories will be ranked separately. So the goal here is to make sure that all the different scales of operation are being served in this grant process. The applications will then be reviewed and ranked using the provided information to calculate a soil and woody biomass carbon sequestration estimate using the Comet Planner that we just shared with you and with the support from our technical assistance group. Projects will be recommended for funding according to the rank, drawing alternatively, like I mentioned, from both the large and small acreage categories, starting with the most cost-effective first. So preference in ranking will be given to project proposals with additional ecosystem values and co-benefits. And this is where if you're submitting an application with multiple practices that are being implemented on one particular parcel of land, there is a competitive advantage because you are sequestering more carbon. Preference will be conferred using points that lift an application's ranking. The effect of these points will only impact the outcome of those projects with a ranking near the funding allocation cutoff. So the department's funding recommendations will reflect the final ranking of the projects. The Board of Supervisors will make the final approval and execute the grant agreements. Keep in mind that the board is not required to follow the Santa Clara County Department's funding recommendations. After award of the grant and prior to the funds being distributed, the grantee will need to execute the county's grant funding agreement, and we'll work with you in putting those together. And after the agreement has been executed, then the project implementation begins. Keep in mind that 5% of the total project funding will be held until the project implementation has been completed. So how do you get paid? Like I mentioned, once you have been notified that the application has been selected for funding, the grant agreement needs to be executed. And once that's completed, then funding will be allocated in a recurring basis if you have annual practices that are funded for multiple years, or if you have just one practice that is for a set duration of time, then it's a one-time payment. 5% of the total project funding will be held until the project implementation is complete. And if the project cannot be completed within the required time frame, the grantee may be required to return any of the unexpended funds to the county and may become ineligible for future applications. The county is aware that there are certain times where unseen for circumstances, for example, we've had very high rainfall years recently. If there is a drought or wildfire that does not permit the implementation of that project in that particular year, then the county does provide some flexibility. So you may extend your timeline for the completion of the project. If there is any leftover money from the payment that has been completed, and you've implemented the practice, you can use that extra money at your discretion for the various implementation costs. So, for example, towards your labor, shipping of the material, like for example, shipping the mulch or the compost. Again, it's at your discretion. So the duration of the project, how long to complete your project, this depends upon the type of practice that you're selecting. For example, if you're choosing compost application, the project timeline, and you selected 1 year of compost application, then your timeline is going to be 1 year. But if you selected 3 years of compost application, then the project completion timeline is 3 years. And if you selected other practices that are 18 months in duration, for example, then the project timeline would be for that 18-month duration. There is an outcome evaluation component to the application and the implementation of the project. So once you have with your each year, as you complete your implementation of the various practices, make sure to complete your outcome evaluation form. And sometimes at no cost to the grantee, the county might want to conduct some check-ins, either some before or after studies, for example, like soil testing, to quantify the positive impact of the practices that are being selected. The results from those tests will be made available for free to the grantee, but like I mentioned, there isn't going to be any cost to the grantee for these various tests or check-ins. How does the County of Santa Clara verify my project? You're required to complete an outcome evaluation form within 180 days of project implementation, and this includes copies of your receipts, photos of purchased materials, and this is something our team can also assist you with as you get closer towards the completion of the project implementation on an annual basis. So the grant applications are due by May 31st. So it's a very simple application form. Make sure you complete it and turn it in by May 31st. If you need technical assistance, make sure that you include your full name, phone number, and email address either into the Zoom chat, or I'll be launching a poll shortly. So make sure that you enter it into that poll. And our team can help you with putting together the cost estimate for your project, working with the Comet Planner to identify those costs. And if you need help with identifying mapping of where your APNs are located, what portions of the APNs are you applying the practices on, this is something we can provide technical assistance with. I'm going to listed here are the contact information for our team. My email's listed here, and Cece, who's on the Zoom call today, she's also available to provide technical assistance. And like I mentioned, we're located at the Highland Avenue office in San Martin, and we're happy to meet with you one-on-one, or if you'd like to schedule a Zoom call with us, I'm happy to do the same with you and provide technical assistance.